Hi, I'm Ricky Fort and welcome to the Real Estate 101 podcast. Join me as I lift the lid on the real estate industry and share some great stories from behind the scenes. Like and subscribe and enjoy this episode. Welcome guys to another episode of Real Estate 101 brought to you by Ricky Fort, that's me, and Geelong Real Estate Co. Very excited today. Ex-Mayor of Geelong, very well known Keith Fagg, welcome.
Thank you, Ricky. Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very exciting. So, mate, obviously spoke quickly before we got on camera just about the whole idea of the show is just about, sharing some stories from people around Geelong that have done well in property or maybe not so well. You're in the former, in the first category, sorry. But yeah, I guess it's really around giving people tips and tricks and motivation around everything. So, mate, just quickly, and it's going to be very hard to keep this to a short bite-sized piece. But I guess really keen just to people get people probably know the public persona you or whatever, but just give a bit of a background. So you grew up in Geelong and where you went to school and just the basic quick stuff.
Yeah. Well, certainly, Ricky, very happy to be here and thanks for the opportunity. Born and bred in Geelong, Belmont boy. I went to Belmont Primary School, just up the road in Mount Pleasant Road, and then Geelong College. And I'm one of five in our family, so it was a big family living in Belmont, and in a house that my father built. My father was a builder and joiner and carpenter, and he built this home in 1951, and the house is still standing.
What street was it?
In Kyle Avenue in Belmont, with a lovely park at the front and the view of the river. And Dad built this big Californian, American-style, ranch-style house on this big long block that he had. And so we grew up there, and then I went to university in Melbourne, La Trobe University, did an economics degree there, did an honours degree in economics, and then worked in various jobs, both in Melbourne and then Northern Territory for a number of years before coming back to Melbourne. Worked as a merchant banker for 2 years in Melbourne, then decided that the commute to Melbourne was getting a bit hard, particularly with a very young family at that stage. Mark was only quite young, our first son.
Oh, so Mark's the oldest?
He's the oldest, yeah.
Yep.
And so he's now 39, so that's how long ago it was. So decided to, and had the opportunity to join the family firm then, and that was 1984, and then worked full-time for the family company.
So the family firm, what's going to that?
Well, that's Faggs Mitre10, Fagg Brothers Proprietary Limited, which is Australia's 8th oldest family business that's still trading with the same family running it.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're very proud of that history.
Just to clear that up, so not related to Mitre10, just in general.
The Fagg Brothers business goes back to 1854.
Wow.
So next year will be our 170th anniversary as a company.
Any big plans to celebrate that?
Oh, we'll probably have a dinner or something like that for our staff and our team. And
how many staff, like just super high level, roughly?
Well, in the current business, there's probably about 250 staff working across the 4 stores in Geelong, and we've just announced that Faggs Mitre10 is merging with the Gay and Son and Co business in Ballarat, Mitre10 store there.
I grew up in Ballarat. I've been to that store many times.
All right. Well, we're merging with them, and as of 1st of August, and we'll be a combined company with 8 stores and probably about 500 staff. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's awesome, and we spoke quickly before off camera as well about what part of life or of your cycle you're still in. You said you were more in the whole pattern or the decline pattern, but it sounds like I think you made that up.
Well, I'm not directly involved operationally with the business anymore. Mitre10 Metcash is Mitre10 Australia, which is owned by Metcash, runs a number of these businesses now operationally. We sort of act more as landlords, but we're also on the board, on the operational company board, and I'm an advisor to the board as well. So it's sort of, I'm not there day to day, but still have active interest in the business.
Got your finger in a few pies still.
That's right.
I think we can't go any further without discussing your cameo appearance on the block. I still remember watching. I was like, "That's Keith Fagg." But so how did that come about?
Well, that was fun. Of course, Mitre10 sponsors the block.
Of course,
done from day one, and it's a really big marketing tool and a great show. Really,
I think it's such a good partnership. Yeah. Anyway, we go into that.
It is.
I think it's an awesome partnership.
It's a great connection. So occasionally they come down to the various stores and do a particular challenge, and that particular day was the Cubby House Challenge, and they had to make cubby houses with just a basic set of materials.
That was done in the South Geelong store?
In the South Geelong store, right in our timber centre there. And my brother Barry said, "No, I'm going to be away. You're on camera." So that lasted about, I think it was on for about 30 seconds in the final version, but it was a lot of fun. They worked really hard that day, and we got to meet the couples.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting because their personas on the show were quite different 100%. In many ways to sort of the people, Mike and Mark, is it? Or the couple. They're just really nice, basic, lovely people. Very funny. Yeah. And they're now running their own show apparently.
That's so awesome. So you had a really great time.
Yes.
How was Scotty Cam?
He's Scott's. What you see is what you get with Scott.
Yeah,
he's
I thought so.
Absolutely the same person. He was. I don't know whether you know the history of him. He was plucked out of a pub, basically.
Really?
They were looking for someone to have this concept of the show. So the background of the show, very quickly, is that the guy who conceived it was watching people doing what's the big house, where they just sat around, did nothing, nothing.
Big Brother.
Big Brother. He saw them. He said, "Well, why don't we? If we've got them in the house, why don't we get them to build the house?" And they had this whole concept going from there.
Is that true?
And that's it. He was a journalist. The guy who's right behind the block. Yeah, he's a journalist who saw this concept, but saw a Big Brother, but thought we can do this in a different way. And it all went from there. And they looked for a sort of builder to sort of help the people in doing the work. And they heard about this guy who was very out there and gregarious sort of builder, and they tracked him down at a pub in Sydney.
What a story.
And watched him in action on Friday night and said, "Would you like to have a test for this show we're going to put together?" And that's how they found Scott Cam.
There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome story.
Yeah. And he's a builder. He still does his own little projects occasionally. He's got a farm out the back of Sydney, which he has his own little timber mill on, apparently, which he cuts timber. And so he's still very practical, very hands-on.
Yeah. Awesome. There you go.
Yeah.
Obviously, outside the show, we were really keen just to, we've got a bit of a common theme. We like to ask, obviously, a little bit about people's backgrounds and stuff, but then I really like to get, and it's very hard to get into yours so quickly, but just what kind of makes people tick, and I think background, like that whole nature versus nurture things, is important for people, I guess. So telling people about, just about your background and your family, and whether your mum and dad were entrepreneurial or risk takers, or I guess. And then maybe how you look to pass that on to your kids.
Yeah, sure. Okay. That's a big question.
It is a big question.
My family is very important to us, as it is to everybody. My mum and dad they're Christian people, and we're involved with Wesley Church in Geelong, as I am still. And that sort of was very much part of life, was church and the values that are inherent in the Christian view of the world. And I guess that's dominated a lot of what my parents did and what the role modelling that they gave to us. So they were heavily involved in community activities across a whole range of things, and all of the five of us and our children in our family in various ways have been involved and doing what we can. We don't do it because it's the right thing to do. So we've my brother and I, particularly in Geelong, are heavily involved in community organisations in different ways, and boards and fundraising for worthy causes and that sort of thing. So that sort of was very important to us. And we were talking before about role models, and with the term mentor wasn't a thing back when I was a young man, but it's very important, and it's well known now that it's really critical for young people to have a significant, they call a charismatic adult in their life outside of their parents. Often teenagers in particular need to have someone other than their parents as their sort of person they go to and relate to. Someone who takes them seriously as a person and actually sort of builds them up, and someone you can also look to establish your own set of values and your own way of operating. And I was fortunate I had that, a youth group leader at the time, Brian Charter, when I was a young man, and he really was sort of the person who outside of my family was probably the most significant role model I had, and many others as well sort of influenced me on my journey. But that sort of set the course of the way we sort of are as people, I think, right? And the set of values that we try to live by. As far as the sort of the business side of it was concerned, it was we didn't talk about business much in the family context. When Barry and I started working in the business, Barry started full-time in 1980. I started in 84. We soon worked out that we were the next generation to come and take over. So we had to learn from our father and uncle just about the way they operated. And
so that started, well, not started, obviously it's been around since 1850, but that they were on the same page. They were running the business in that direction, and you guys, as you said, were the next wave to come in. And
yes, there was a cousin as well, who sadly passed away a number of years ago, but we were the next generation, so we were given the opportunity sort of to work with alongside them before. But Uncle Stan, who was the managing director of the company, passed away in 1989, and we worked with him I worked with him for 5 years, Barry for 9 years before that happened. And he was really one of the sort of old school businessmen, sort of had perhaps a bit tougher on staff and other sort of things than we would have otherwise been. You learn some things from him, but then you have to adapt, and you have to work in your own way, consistent with your own values and your own way of approach to life. And Barry and I worked very well together, running the business for 30 years, basically. We had complementary roles in the business, but we also overlapped a lot and talked a lot about each time about critical decisions and things we needed to make. And we grew the business from employing 50 staff to about 250 when we essentially sold the majority share of our business, trading business, to Metcash in 2012.
They often talk about the circle of influence too, is like another buzzword or whatever that's been thrown around at the moment. And you are the 5 people that you hang around. I guess that's a new younger versions of that. But I think. So outside of your family connections and those initial first business connections, I guess when it started coming to like growing wealth and doing things outside the family, like getting into real estate, obviously it's a real estate podcast, but were there anybody else, are there other people that you've, leveraged with or learned from or?
Well, not really. My father, interestingly, he was a builder. He'd love to get every Sunday afternoon, he'd often take us around to the various sites that we were supplying materials for, or windows and doors for, to check it out. But he didn't ever invest in property himself.
Really?
Way back, he and his brother built a holiday house in Torquay. We wish we still had it in Torquay. But he never actually invested in property. He was actually more involved in shares and other things like that. So there wasn't an influence from that. And Stan likewise really didn't do much in that area.
So how did that start for you? So
I bet we did have from the company point of view, we looked at property a lot, commercial property and development property. So that was a company thing, but not an individual.
Yeah. So from an individual perspective, you're like, you know what, my cup's really full from the Faggs brand and everything we're doing is part of the business. But obviously we met. Through doing just normal residential transactions. So, and obviously I met Mark through doing the same thing. But so tell us about obviously just maybe what age you were when you started and you thought, I want to diversify a bit, buy my first property.
Sure. Well, I bought my first investment property in 1994, almost 30 years ago. And it was a small house. And a friend of mine was a estate agent, and he said, this house is...
Who was it?
Simon Faulkner.
Oh, yeah.
He's now retired.
Yes.
But he's a good friend of mine from way back.
Yep.
He said, this house has come up. It's I think it was on the corner of in Oxford Street, and it was in the I think it was 85,000 or something, and but it had a big block, and you could probably subdivide the block off the back and build a house at the back, and so I was at the point our family was still quite young at that stage, but I thought, well, we can probably get a loan and stretch the situation a bit to enable that. So we bought it. I had tenants in the house, and it was a classic sort of 600 square metre block in Belmont, and we're able to subdivide the block at the back because it was on a corner.
Yeah, corner block. Yep.
And then built a house. In those days you couldn't subdivide the land unless you had a building to go on it.
Yep.
So we with Hamlet Homes. We were one of our major customers, built my first little house on that, and sold it and made about $3,000. So we're talking before about successes and failures. Well, we didn't lose money. It wasn't a highlight. I got my money back, but it wasn't a sort of a stellar investment. I wish I still had it.
Yeah, exactly. Probably that's a good segue into, we like to ask people obviously about things that have gone really well for them and maybe properties that they've done really well on properties that haven't done on. That's obviously, that was more probably just, it sounds like you didn't hold it for long enough or whatever.
No,
but
that's right.
I guess when, keep going from that story, I guess. What was next? What happened after that?
Well, in that time, we also had bought a block of land in Kennett River as a holiday house, sort of like holiday location, and we built a house down there, my father and I, back in the late 80s, and so that was always... So I guess that sort of just tweaked, when you're thinking back, that sort of tweaked interest in property. You always just keep an eye on the papers and just see what would come up, and so I've just bought a couple of other houses that were suitable for.
Did you always kind of look for subdivision potential?
Oh, that was always on the go. Yeah, I actually bought the block on the land some years ago. A house on the other side of this and
did the same thing.
Did the same thing. Yeah, but that was for a different purpose. Yeah. But really, I guess I haven't been heavily involved in that sort of thing until the last 8 or 9 years, really. Yeah. Which after I've left the business full time and saw an opportunity. And as I was saying to you before, what I have become quite focused on the last sort of 6 or 7 years particularly is disability housing, right?
Yep.
Housing for people who are participants in the NDIS or the TAC. And that's a really interesting field, a complex field, but really interesting. And the background to that is that when I was mayor, I met the then CEO of the NDIS, the new NDIS at that stage, David Bowen, and he was talking about the fact that there's not enough appropriate housing for people with disability. There's too many young people in nursing homes who don't need to be there. There's too many people living in a substandard accommodation, public housing or other housing doesn't suit their needs. And the NDIS was going to be looking at that. And that always stuck in the back of my mind. And I think 2016 came across a block of flats in Belmont in Torquay Road, which was around the classic 60s or 50s or 60s cream brick set of flats, right? 6 one-bedroom, one-bedders wouldn't ever meet any current standards now for residential, tenancies. And I thought this could be an opportunity and to fully renovate and make them available for sale for people with disability who had the capacity to buy or to get a loan based upon the funding they'd get from the NDIS to support their housing. And the context of that was that people with a disability often got moved around from places or didn't have a choice of where they went or were always under the sort of uncertainty of what the future might hold. But if they could own something that was appropriately built to their needs and to meet the NDIS standards, then they had equity. They had the sense of equity, like we all want to have in a property, and then could use as to build their wealth or their sense of security. So renovated this property in 2016-17, and it was a major renovation. It was almost pretty easy to start again. Yeah. We took it back to the bricks were fine. The brickwork was fine, but we took the roofs off and a whole new roof structures, new plaster, everything, because the standards that NDIS require are all about wider access doorways, accessible bathrooms, no stairs, no steps, also many requirements you have to meet, which make a lot of sense, and they make sense for living generally, particularly as we're getting older, we sort of need, the fewer steps the better, etc. But there's, as I said, a lot of requirements for the NDIS. So with those, I was able to sell 2 of the 3 units to people who actually now live there and own it, and they're very happily, making their life there as normal. It's not an institution. It's just a normal set of housing.
Yep. And so you kept the third one for yourself?
I kept the third one. Yep. It was available for sale, but the person who needed to go in there just didn't have the capacity to buy, or their family. Often we're dealing with families who have children, and the issue is that they've been looking after their children for many, many years, decades, and that's fine. But they get to the point they're aging. they can't lift their child anymore or their young adult anymore. It's just safely, and what will happen? And the query is what will happen to them, to their child when they're no longer able to do it or pass away or whatever.
Yep.
And so I went from there and bought another property up the road to do a similar thing. In their case, demolished the house,
learned
from that one,
yep.
and started again with 2 brand new units,
yep.
and sold one and kept one. And the
yep.
one
is that like, just to jump in there, but is that a formula for you? Usually, like, sell one, keep one. If so, why do you do that?
Yeah, well, I would much prefer to sell, frankly, because it's all about the outcome. Really, there's nothing more satisfying and I've now got probably about 10 units and different things. I've got 3 projects on the go right now. There's nothing more satisfying than seeing someone who you've met, and you get to know these people very well. It's a lot of work to get to the point of to understand their needs, to work with their care team, to find a location of a property that's going to suit them. Armstrong Creek's an emerging area for that because, of course, accessibility to shopping centres, that sort of thing, is really actually quite good. Even though it's a fair way out, you can live quite locally there. So you go through a long process. It's going to be 2.5 years before someone actually moves in. So by the time you actually see them move in and see them happy and settled in a really appropriate place that's easy for them to operate in, then that's really satisfying. And that's what I settled at for me. So I don't want to hold on to any more than I need to.
Yeah.
Not everybody has got the capacity to borrow the money from the bank based upon the allowance they'll get from the NDIS. But for some who want to take that step, and it gets take a bit of a risk, but knowing they'll get the funding from the NDIS, it actually makes sense for them to do that, and then they have that as an asset.
Yeah. From, I guess, this is something that no one else, like the general public, aren't doing this. And I guess that was a really exciting part about, talking to you in your story, and because you've got to that stage where you've probably, your cup's full, as I said, from a commercial perspective, and what you're doing with Faggs as a brand, and it's probably full from like a family wealth perspective and stuff you're doing there. And then, I think you're the only person that I know that's kind of doing it with the focus of it's not just about you. And it's not like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable or weird or whatever, so we can skip past it. But you're the only person I know doing that. Yeah. Give people some insight as to, like, if they wanted to do it, like from a profitability perspective and like the benefit to them outside of the benefits that people from the NDIS. But why should people consider that outside the mainstream? Because obviously there's like Airbnb is really big at the moment, which is causing a lot of problems from a residential perspective. But so tell people about why they should consider it.
Well, look, I'm not saying it's for everybody, because it's not a standard, straightforward sort of set and forget investment. The numbers certainly stack up. The headline numbers look quite good, right? And in the early days of the NDIS, with this what's called the SDA, the Specialist Disability Accommodation Allowance, the headline numbers, particularly when you had low interest rates, 2 and 3%, look really attractive. You might be able to achieve a 10 to 15% return theoretically.
Yep.
But it's not.
And just as a standard for reference, a standard residential return might be 5%,
5 or 6, 7%, maybe 7, maybe at the best, but certainly 5 or 4 at the moment, probably even less. I don't know. And the interest rates don't sort of marry up with that at the moment, do they? But that will come back. We could perhaps talk about that later on. They'll come back. But there's a lot of work to get to the build the building to the standard, and it's a higher cost to build than the average cost.
To keep jumping in, is there anyone that you recommend that people could go and see, like your Hamlin Homes, or are there anyone?
Hamlin are doing it. I think there's 2 or 3 other companies doing it. The company I use is Linked Building.
Yes,
Jason Farnell from Linked.
Builds are beautiful.
Yeah, they sort of understand the disability sector pretty well. They've done a fair bit in that area, and also we work with there's the house we built have got to be obviously designed to that standard, got to be accredited by independent assessor to make sure they meet all the standards about the size of doorways. There's about 40 different criteria, and they have to be assessed on each one of those. And there's as an iterative process during the process of we can't even commence work until we have a design certificate that says yes, this is going to meet the standards.
Yep.
But then we're going to make sure we build it to that standard, and it's checked all the way through. So and this is and we have an occupational therapist who I work with who is also an assessor. The headline numbers look good, but it's quite a complicated field. It's a very interesting field, but quite. It's not straightforward. It's not just you just build a house, put a pennant there, away you go. It's not that simple because you've got to make sure that try to ensure that the location's right for the person and the setup's right. Also that they've got the right level of funding within the NDIS SDA scheme. There's a whole matrix of funding levels depending upon the type of house or villa that's built, the type of disability the person has, and whether they're living singly or with another person or with two other people who are participants. So it's quite a complex field. I'm not saying don't get into it at all, but there needs to be more disability housing.
Is there any good resources and things for people?
There aren't many out there. The NDIS website's got a fair bit of stuff out there, and there are quite a few what are called SDA provider businesses who are actually building houses on spec, basically. In the early days, I was building on spec, basically, build it and they will come sort of thing, and they did, fortunately, because there was a demand. But it's not as straightforward as that going forward. So what I do typically now is try to identify the resident who we're going in and their needs, and have them, if you like, signed up first. Before we really just start building. Or I might have a property, but I don't work out what the property will be until we know who's going to move in there and how it's going to be. I've got a house I'm taking over next week in Armstrong Creek, but we've been working with those two people for about 18 months to get to that point.
That's awesome.
So, but it's a really interesting field, and it's satisfying to be in it, but it's not without its challenges.
Yeah. Look, I'm conscious, obviously time's gotten away. We haven't even scratched the surface of Keith Fagg in your story. Again, before we started, one of the things that I thought might be good is because you've been around, you've been successful in different walks of life, but you've just been around. So one thing I think would be really great is if maybe you could talk to people about and we've got to tread carefully because a lot of the younger generation get pretty upset when we say, the older old heads had 18% interest rate and they say, but you could buy a can of Coke for 20 cents. It is relevant, but it's not relevant. So I guess maybe just come at it from a different perspective around, what patterns have you seen with these higher interest rates? Like, why should people hang on? What should...
Okay. Well,
again, I like asking big questions.
That's a big question. If you just... We were just chatting before about, what would you say to your 20-year-old self? And I would have said, buy some more property, early on. It would have, not that we would have had to, work out how we're going to fund it and save up for the deposits. But long-term property always, certainly in Geelong and the Geelong region, always goes up. Property is a medium to long-term game. Generally long-term, you've got to be prepared to hang on for and work through the difficulties. The interest rates, current interest rates will come down. They will come off. There's no doubt about that. Probably quicker than they went up, maybe. They were talking today about the fact that the Reserve Bank probably hung on too long before they started increasing rates. Therefore, they had quite a steep increase. But maybe if they had started a year earlier, there might have been less impact on people. Anyway, but they will come back. And the old adage, they're not making more land, right? Well, they do create more land by subdivisions, that sort of thing. But if there's any possibility that you can work your way forward to get to deposit enough for a deposit to take something on, I'd encourage people to look at that. You look back at it. There's of all the things we bought, there's probably 10 times more that have got away, I wish I'd done that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, and none of us can see the future.
But overall, do you think it's fair to say, like, we will get there, it will be okay?
Yeah. Well, certainly in this region, there's no doubt we're going to have there's still a huge amount of property, people still come down here.
I think there's no better person to speak to the future of Geelong or like the prosperity of Geelong than you.
Oh, well, we've been through the highs and lows. Certainly the worst time we finished was the pyramid crash, really, in 1990, which just felt just the whole of Geelong was, because Geelong was pyramid,
so
or pyramid
flat.
was Geelong.
Yep. And then obviously Shell, Alcoa, sorry.
Ford closed,
Alcoa.
announced the closure when I was mayor, and Alcoa was close after that, and all those things. And again, it was thought that we would,
it's over.
It was over, but it wasn't. Even at that stage, and certainly since then, Geelong had well truly gone beyond total dependence upon those big employers.
Income, NDIS, WorkSafe,
exactly,
TAC,
ABS, the taxation office itself. They're the government ones. Plus, what's happening at Federal Mills, and even around here in Gordon Avenue, there's lots of plans, aren't there?
It's exciting.
But the residential development, but south has still got a fair way to go. But it's the same size development up at Lovely Banks and at West Lara.
Lovely Banks Real Estate Co. coming at you. Keep an eye out.
Is that right? Oh, really? Very good. Okay, fantastic. Well, there you go. Well, it's going to be another Armstrong Creek in a different way. But so I've got every confidence that Geelong will be there. It'll have ups and downs. We thought the pyramid was the end of Geelong, but really by the mid 1990s we were back on track and our business certainly was, but the community was, and it's just going to we just in lifetimes you're going to see these rise and falls in activity, and but long term I've got a great deal of confidence in Geelong, and that's where our business is, and we keep reinvesting in our business here in Geelong, and of course now we've gone through the merger.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, that's probably all we've got time for. I think we probably just schedule right now to book you back in because, so we haven't even scratched the surface, but I think it's a great way to end the show on confidence that, while it doesn't feel great right now, Geelong's future prosperity and stuff is certainly bright, and it's good to know our front man is of the same opinion. So, Keith, thanks so much for coming on the show, and see you on the next one.
Okay, thank you.